Hello and welcome to the TGH College Hardwood Podcast. I am Joe. With me is Greg, as always. We had a Sweet 16 and an Elite Eight happen already, Greg. How are you doing?
I was doing great until the Elite Eight games happened. I had, if for our loyal listeners, you already know this, but those of you who are just tuning in, when we picked our brackets, I hated mine. I thought it was awful, and I ended up getting 8 for 8 on Elite Eight teams, 13 to 16 Sweet 16 teams, but it kind of fell apart when Bama lost for me, and then well, I guess I won't ruin any surprises. We can just hop into it. But before we talk about these games, we got some coaching news to talk about, Joe.
Yeah, so we'll start off with maybe the minor ones that we're going to get to here, Greg. We have Phil Martelli Jr. taking the VCU job. He was at Bryant, so we're going to be seeing Phil Martelli in the stands of VCU games. We have Josh Pastner to UNLV. He was doing TV. Obviously, had the time at Memphis, had the time at Georgia Tech, was doing TV, and now feels like he's going to be good in the NIL world at UNLV. And we had Sacramento State hire Mike Bibby. Those were the three minor ones I had to talk about, Greg. Mike Bibby, obviously former NBA player, but has some reported legal troubles and also was fired from two high school jobs. So very out of left field hire for Sacramento State. But those were some of the notable ones that were. We don't have to go into too much detail on them, and it's just kind of like either bigger jobs or bigger names that you've heard about before.
Yeah, obviously the VCU job opened up because Ryan Odom took the Virginia job. We went through that. Joe, Sacramento State. Correct me if I'm wrong. There was a. It didn't end up being him, but there was an NFL star that was rumored to be their football coach, wasn't there? I feel like you'd remember this more than I would.
Uh, no, it is an NFL guy.
Oh, they did. They did. I remember
Uh,
that story coming out and thinking, wow, it just between this and that. Now it sounds like maybe Sacramento State is making a push to.
no. Sorry. It was not. I was thinking Mike Vick went to Norfolk State. He is Norfolk State's head coach. It is Brendan Marion. He used to be UNLV's offensive coordinator. But you're right about your overall point. They are going very far into the athletic scape because they've talked about $10 million in NIL or whatever they have to spend. So they go get a big name in Mike Bibby at the very least.
I swear there was someone during the. I thought they didn't end up hiring him, but I swear there was someone connected to that job, and they didn't end up getting hired. But there was a big name. I can't remember who it was at this point, but neither here nor there. So good for them. Off the top of my head, I guess it's really bad. I feel like I don't know what they in the Big Sky. I can't even think of what conference they're in right now.
Yes, they are the big sky.
Yes. All right. One for one. I'm ahead on trivia time for today. Um, yeah, I don't really have anything to say about those other jobs. Obviously those jobs might be relevant. Maybe next March we might be talking about one of those, but we will probably go most of next year without touching on any of those jobs unless, like Joe said, we have some Mike Bibby legal stuff to mention.
Yeah, definitely on that. And then we have Fran McCaffrey taking the Penn job. Penn is his alma mater. His kids are throughout college now. They just got through college, and he decided to go back to his alma mater for this one. So God bless those Ivy League officials, even though they usually work a lot of different games in different conferences. God bless those smaller conference games he's going to be coaching against. But that kind of struck me as a little bit weird. He got fired from Iowa, but we kind of were like, did he really deserve to be fired from Iowa? And then he goes down to Penn. I would have felt he maybe would have gotten a little bit better of a job, but it is nice to go. I guess go to your alma mater.
Yeah, just looking at how it kind of ended, I mean, barely above 500 basically since the Luca Garza years. So, it hasn't been that great, but probably not worth, like absolutely fireable. I don't know. I guess just in, today's world, you think, hey, we can flip it quick, and Ben McCollum's been a winner at every level. Like I said, him and Will Wade are the two from that we talked about last week that I have a gut feeling are going to work out. For Fran, I mean, this is just obviously dude wants to keep coaching and gets to do it as alma mater. I mean, it's good for him. I
Absolutely,
don't know what NIL is going to be like at Penn though.
that's very true. The revenue sharing for private schools is going to be good for schools that are in the Big East because they have more money to focus on. basketball because they don't have football, but Penn does have a football team too, so that's gonna make things different for them as well. Uh, those were the ones we kind of just had to mention really quickly, Greg. Next up, we have Richard Pitino taking the Xavier job. This comes as a shock. We thought Chris Mack was going to be back to lead Xavier once again, just them going with a familiar face. But I also think that Xavier AD Greg Christopher maybe said, "Hey, if I have two coaches, I rehire and then they both leave me. That's like a stain on my resume. I can't do that." So we went Richard Pitino, so he'll be coaching in the same conference as his dad, Rick Pitino, who's at St. John's. Seems like Richard is ready for this job. He didn't do the greatest at Minnesota, but Minnesota has a lack of resources compared to the rest of the Big Ten for the basketball at the very least. And really seems like he found himself at New Mexico and had a very good run after New Mexico had some really troubling times in the couple years before that. So he's going to possibly not his best player, but possibly bring some of his players from New Mexico. Possibly, it did bring all of his staff. Besides, he's keeping on Dante Jackson, who was at Xavier before that. So, Greg, what do you think about the Richard Pitino hire?
Yeah, as Joe already mentioned, Donovan Dent, inarguably the best player on the New Mexico roster last year. He's going to transfer to UCLA, play for Mick Cronin. Uh, given a choice, if you laid it out to me, Chris Mack or Richard Pitino, I feel like just because we know it's worked before, I'd probably take Chris Mack. I won't say I'm terribly upset. I don't think it's a bad hire. I think there's potential, but I think ultimately I'd rather have Chris Mack. And maybe some of that is because, he was the coach when Joe and I were there at school, and, like the program, reached its, we talked about last week, its highest highs. It's a different world now. Maybe it wouldn't work out the same, even though we saw Sean Miller, kind of come back in and hit repeat. It's still a different world. Joe already mentioned that Max, he's a pretty good X's and O's guy. We'll have to see with Richard Pitino. We had talked about offline. We had talked about, hey, there's a private plane being chartered from Charleston to Cincinnati, like the night that we thought maybe Mac was going to get hired, and then the next thing you know, we see a tweet. Mac says coming back for year 2 to Charleston, and 2 hours later they announced the Richard Pitino thing. So it happened pretty fast, and it was just weird to me. I kind of said this, my just the makes your head spin when, one Wednesday night, Sean Miller and Rodney Terry are coaching against each other, and Richard Pitino is getting ready for Marquette. And 6 days later, Sean Miller is giving his opening presser at Texas, and Richard Pitino is the coach at Xavier, and Rodney Terry's without a job. I don't know if he's been picked up as an assistant anywhere, but I just how quickly this stuff happens, and it's the nature of it. The portal, even though it did open later this year, it's still right smack in the middle of things, and this is how you roster build, especially after a coaching change. So this stuff, it just happens quicker than I feel like it used to.
Definitely does. There is not a very good solution to that because if you move the transfer portal date back to, it's going to have a lot of people who are in limbo, and that's not necessarily fair to them either. So, it is a little bit frustrating to have the NCAA tournament go on and transfer portal open. Something, there's not a perfect schedule considering these are universities as a part of the NCAA, and the NCAA is not making rules that are great for every sport. They're making general rules, so that makes it tougher. I like Patino, Greg, too. I think it's like a B hire. I guess a lot of B hires out there this year, but it's interesting to see what he can do with the resources Xavier has, with the revenue sharing they're going to have next year, which makes it a little bit more balanced towards these private Big East schools for at least the short term. We'll see the SEC and Big Ten will probably fix that in some way in the future, but that should make things interesting. I thought they were going to get Donovan Dent. That had me really excited. Now I'm still decently excited to see this, and I'll be hoping and happy to watch the what's it called? Watch the Patino versus Patino game here next year. All right, the last bit of coaching news we got to get to. Kevin Willard at Maryland had a good tournament run, made the Sweet 16. But this whole tournament run, his whole fan base has hated him because there has been rumors he was going to leave for the Villanova job. That did happen. He's taking the Villanova job. Now, there is a lot of bad blood here because people thought he was already taking a step out on the process and taking the Villanova job. But there's some things to note here, too. he is worried about the revenue share thing in the future for the Big Ten schools. Mike Locksley, the Maryland football coach, I think, and them have been sparring in the media between each other about who deserves more money, who needs more money, and also the AD that hired him is also gone now. So it is something that he has had to consider, and I guess he feels like Villanova is the best for his future. But it is very weird that Maryland has a decently good basketball history. It seems like this year with the roster they put together was really good, and it maybe could build some momentum. And now it's like, hey, this guy's out the door because of some of the things that happened at Maryland and in the sport overall with the revenue sharing too. So complex situation. There's a lot of bad blood. Apparently, he told the players he was leaving via Zoom today, which a lot of people didn't like that either. Especially Maryland and Philadelphia or Villanova is close enough that you could fly back and forth and figure it out. But Greg, thoughts on this one? This is definitely, I wouldn't say the most shocking, but because it was kind of known that was going to happen, but definitely one of the ones where it's like, leaving Maryland for Villanova. I don't know.
Joe, had you heard this? They wanted to stay an extra night over Christmas. Kevin Willard in Maryland, but I guess the AD or whoever runs the athletic department said it was too expensive or something. I've heard that mentioned a couple places this week. I either didn't hear it or took no notice of it when it was the peak middle of the season. But like you think about where Willard's been, he's been at Seton Hall, and now you got Shaheen Holloway complaining about them not having money. Now he's going to Villanova. Traditionally, really all they care about is basketball there, and obviously a winning tradition. So I mean, that just seems like a 1+1 = 2 thing. If these are the kind of things that he's been dealing with, whatever the fans think, going to go where it appears the pastures would be greener. And obviously, he's already coached in the Big East, and he knows what kind of atmosphere he wants to be in. So, I mean, I guess it even though I don't think I really had it on my radar until the everything started popping up and everybody was chit chattering about it because you just figured, hey, guy's got a great year. Why would he leave? Well, when you start hearing all the background, Joe already laid it out for you, the rest of the stuff, then okay, it starts to make sense. So I mean, I don't necessarily have a problem with it. I don't know why I would, but as far as where he's going to go, I think he's going to be a pretty good improvement over Kyle Neptune. I think he's going to give Villanova fans a little bit to taste, more than what they've gotten the last couple of years. He's already proven that he can coach in, today's college basketball atmosphere and environment where the rosters flip pretty quickly, and he can still land big recruits, as he got Derek Queen this year, who had a huge impact on their run to the Sweet 16. So, it gives me a little bit of a better outlook Big East wise, I'd obviously rather it be Chris Mack or Sean Miller coaching at Xavier, but I feel like we got a couple of improvements in the coaching world there.
Yeah, and this is not, if there's no revenue sharing in the Big East that is better than the other conferences. I don't think this happens. I think he stays and figures it out. But it is, I think, an improvement from Villanova, Maryland. The rumored to be in on Buzz Williams. Buzz Williams wants out. His whole roster might be gone, and he wants to. He's a program hopper. He's done it several times. Marquette to Virginia Tech, Texas A&M. It doesn't seem like he wants to stay in one place. So Buzz Williams could be in play there, but they could also get a coach who is pretty decent as well. But it looks like, Greg, just over the last point here, I do like Kevin Willard to Villanova, but this coaching carousel might go on longer than you might think. And last year kind of did the same way thing too. John Calipari left Kentucky the week after the Final Four, after the national championship, or the week of the national championship. After that Final Four weekend when he met with Arkansas, and that left things open a little bit longer than usual. But it's feeling like this might keep on going down and around with this carousel, which is not something we had in the past either. So, especially if the transfer portal open, a lot of people want to get coaches in right away. But about finding the right coach, we saw Mark Pope get hired late last year, and he still put a good roster together, and they obviously made the Sweet 16. So. That's something to kind of watch. We'll have a lot more news next week when we talk coaches as well. Maryland will probably have a coach, which means that someone else will have to hire a new coach as well. And it goes on and on and on.
Joe, do you have off the top of your head? I don't know if I know sometimes you might put a list together of targets, but obviously there is plenty going on. I don't, if you asked me, like, who do you think it's going to be? Like, I don't even know that I could list 3 names off the top of my head. That'd be like, yeah, maybe.
for Maryland.
Yeah,
I mean, if it's not, you're saying if it's not Buzz. Yeah, I don't know. I guess Buzz will be on the list just because of that rumor.
I did hear buzz, but I just chalk that up to Twitter, you know, being Twitter.
Yeah, because of the rumor him, I would say there has been rumors that Chris Beard wants out of Ole Miss, but I think he wants more of one of the like maybe top 10 or 15 job. Whether you think Maryland is that, especially with the current conversation we talked about with the rev sharing, I don't know. So those are two guys that are like bigger names I would think about. But you're right. Like after that, like all the mid-major guys have already been hired. Like, what are you going to do? Go get Chris Mack? He didn't even win his conference this year. It's the first year, obviously, but there's not many left. You can get Leon Rice from Boise State, but he seems like he's pretty set out west, and I don't know. All right, Greg, let's get to our brackets here. We're going to do the same thing we did last week. We're going to go from region to region, and then we'll kind of like recap it. We'll make our picks at the end. So let's start off with the South region with Auburn, Greg. The game we just saw as we started recording right after this game. Auburn beats Michigan 78-65. Janai Broom, 22 points, 16 rebounds against those Twin Towers at Michigan. So very impressive performance from him. And then in the other game, Ole Miss had a lead over Michigan State for a long, long time, and Michigan State kept on fighting back, kept on fighting back. Freshman Jace Richardson, the guy that we said needed to be good for them to have a good tournament run, was on fire. He had 20 points on 4 of 6 shooting from deep, 6 of 8 from the field, which sets up the Auburn and Michigan State game, which was the game a lot of people wanted to see. Bruce Pearl, Tom Izzo, both hard-nosed head coaches, and we got a game where Auburn went out to an early lead. Michigan State struggled to come back. They made it look close in the end, but it really wasn't as close as the score indicated. We had some theatrics too. Janai Broom had 25 points in this one, 14 rebounds. He left the game with an elbow injury, ended up coming back into the game to finish it strong. Had a cool sequence where he had a one-handed rebound and then hit a three with that busted up elbow. So Auburn's able to make the Final Four. Bruce Pearl's done a good job with that program. They're not a traditional basketball program, but now his second Final Four at Auburn. And we get he was the last one of the teams to do this, so I'll say it. He made sure that all four number one seeds in a top heavy year got to the Final Four. Greg.
Yeah, I did just I thought this would be interesting. So tweet I just happened to see come across my phone. Tweeted from Matt Norlander, who Joe has an affinity for. 10 best Ken Palm teams ever. And the ratings go back to 96, 97. There's a list of the 10 best Ken Palm teams ever. 4 of those teams are going to be in San Antonio next week. Now, obviously, Ken Palm ratings, they live in their own universe, but it's still basically it's the universe is each individual year, but it's basically a rating of how much better these teams are than the rest of the teams or the field in their given year. So when you sit here and you look at that, it makes you go, okay, I guess that's how we got to this this point where we have the 4-1 seeds. And I mean, I guess it makes sense. 08 Kansas is on that list. Some of these will drop out, I would imagine, out of the top 10 as the next 3 games are played. But you just think, okay, well, that was the other year that we had all 4-1 seeds. Probably with the competition they were having, you'd think somebody would be on there and whatnot. But as far as the South region, the Michigan State Ole Miss game honestly had a little more scoring than I thought it might. And I feel like this game is kind of a blur for me, and I'm not sure why. I don't remember a ton of, like, I feel like I have memories or like vivid memories of the other games or moments, but for this, for whatever reason, it's just I don't know why, but nothing. Does anything stick out to you from this game?
For which game?
For Ole Miss, Michigan State, which is
Oh,
like one of the closer games of this weekend, but just nothing's like ringing off in my head as memorable from this game. And I don't know. I'm pretty sure Cohen Carr had didn't he had like a steal and a in the backcourt and a dunk. Like I think I remember that, but other than that, I mean, there's not much that sticks out for me. As far as the Auburn Michigan game, that was a fun game to watch, and even though Michigan kind of just trailed off late in the second half, it was a little bit of an interesting chess match. Sad that we're done seeing Danny Wolf play college basketball. It was a lot of fun to watch him. He should be going on to the NBA. Would imagine. I don't know if you've done a mock recently because Joe doesn't have anything else to do with this time. But I would imagine he's probably late first round, maybe, I don't know, somewhere between 18 to 28, just depending on. I have no idea what team needs are right now because, got to be honest with you, I don't think I've watched like more than 3 seconds of the NBA this year, which is odd even for me. And then we get to today. Just kind of like Joe said, I didn't look, Joe, but I have to imagine Broome ended up the MOP of the South region, correct?
I didn't see that either, so I have no idea.
I would have to think he did, especially with the performance that he put on in this game. It just kind of felt like, I mean, for most of the second half, Auburn's got a 10, 12, 14 point lead, and every time Michigan State hit a shot, it felt like Auburn just went on easy mode on the offensive end until the very end. And that full court pressure, the half court trap where they were sending 2 guys at the ball didn't seem to do much, but they struggled with that full court pressure. So I'm really going to be looking at that when we get to next week's games. They'll be playing Florida, a deep team who, if they want to, could press them for the whole game. And obviously you don't have to be that aggressive, but just something to think about, because Michigan State really, if they hit a couple more of those shots, they could have made this really interesting. It finishes as a 6-point game. It really wasn't that close, except for the fact that there were a couple, steals, turnovers that Michigan State had, but they just blundered.
Yeah, definitely. The one thing I do remember about the Ole Miss Michigan State game, Greg, since you asked, was Pedula just kept on making these crazy shots, and that's what he's done all year. So maybe it's not too different from other games, but do remember that. We had Auburn and Michigan. Just one more note on that. We had Trey Donaldson kind of say to do the too short thing on Todd Pettiford, and after that point, Trey Donaldson didn't score the rest of the game, and Todd Pettiford had like 20 points. So be careful what you wish for. It is a emotionally charged game with Trey Donaldson playing his former team. But Auburn put them to bed. And then in this last game, Greg, yeah, it was not a close game. Michigan State deserves some credit for battling back. I would say um, Michigan State kind of like the thing that got them all year was their lack of shooting. And there was plenty of times where they had 1 or 2 or 3 offensive rebounds on a possession and they kept on missing threes. And that's going to do you in. So while I think Tom Izzo deserves some consideration for coach of the year this year, because I really do think that the talent on this team wasn't that great. If they want to be a serious title threat team, they need to have more offense. And maybe that starts with getting Jason Richardson back for next year. But Auburn goes to the Final Four. Greg, let's go over to the next region, which has Duke coming out of it. Duke was able to beat Arizona in a game where Caleb Love, he did his best to end Duke for the second time in his career. He had 35 points, but Cooper Fleck had one of the best NCAA tournament games by any player with 30 points, 6 rebounds, 7 assists. His passing has been on very good display in this one. They win that one 100-93. And then in the other game, Alabama beats BYU. They set an NCAA tournament record for threes. I was the guy who on TikTok videos was saying that like I'm taking BYU because of the fact that I don't Alabama plays a style that is not sustainable to how they play because they ranked 116th 3-point percentage. What do? They end up setting the record 25 threes, and a lot of it is because BYU kept on going under screens and they were I don't think I blame this too much to be honest, but like they were like, hey, if they want to shoot themselves out of the game, we're going to let them. It just happened that Alabama was on that night, and it ended up being a bad strategy. So BYU gets sent home, and then Duke and Alabama on Saturday night. Duke they really flexed their muscles in this one, winning 85-65. Defense was on point against such a good offensive team like Alabama, and again, it's kind of you know, I know, Greg, you picked Auburn, I picked Florida, but it's getting to the point now where now that Duke has been tested by some good teams in this tournament, where they hadn't been tested in the ACC as much as maybe other teams like in the SEC, it's, gun to my head right now, I think Duke's probably winning the title, and I think a lot of people would agree just based on how they've played in this tournament.
Yeah, you really look at, I mean, just the difference in Bama. Jekyll and Hyde, they shoot 49% from deep on BYU, and then they turn around and shoot 25% from deep on Duke, and that, just like Joe said, that Duke defense, really did all. There's a lot of credit to be handed to them on that. Um, they, there's times where they just make it difficult to score. They're not just a one dimensional team. I haven't looked recently, but I have to imagine if they're not top 10 in both offensive and defensive efficiency, they're probably top 15, yeah, they're one
Top
in
10.
offense and four in defense as of right now. So um, they do play both sides of the ball and they play it well. Um, I feel like, Joe, with some of the concerns about experience, that's what concerned me the most as far as up and down this roster. Like, there was some help, there was some experience. I still remember when we talked about this team earlier in the year, especially preseason, I thought maybe Mason Gillis would have more of an impact on the team, just since there's not a ton of there's some, but there's not a ton of experience. Like you've already said, now we've got some big games under our belt. They throttled Bama. It wasn't just a defensive game. They also, played really well on the other side of the ball. So, you know, this Duke Houston game is going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot different than last year's game, where Duke ends up pulling it out because Jamal Shed gets hurt in the second half, and that just kind of changed the outcome of the game. So, I still feel like I'm liking more whoever comes out of the left side of the bracket, but I just don't think at this point, this is not going to be anything world breaking to say, but I don't feel like whoever walks away with this title that I'm going to be sitting there saying, I can't believe. Sometimes you look up in the Final Four or late in March and you're like, like, you mean one of those teams is going to play for the national title? And like last year, we got Purdue and UConn, and we got the matchup we wanted in the end, and two of the better teams. You could give me any which way for this national title game, and I'm going to feel like whoever comes out the champion has earned it. And Duke is definitely taking those steps. I am still leaning the left side of the bracket, South and West. Obviously, Florida had their struggles, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I think I like something more about what's over there.
Yeah, you definitely get to a point now where, especially with Auburn, I know you had reservations about them last week. This week's different. Auburn's playing better. Duke, I think, is maybe the nation's favorite, and I would say I'm fearing them winning the title. I may still pick my national champion, Florida, that I had at this preseason when we get to the end. I'm up in the air, but you're right. The point is, any one of these four teams can win it. They're that good in the metrics. They are that good this season. Um, and this is not a tournament where the best team always wins. Like a lot of times they will. We'll see like 2012 Kentucky, best team in the country. Last year with UConn. 2 years ago with UConn when they were the 4 seed, like were they the best team in the country? Like they ended up getting hot in March and they had that bad middle part of the season. Were they the best team in the country? Probably not. So this year, I think you're right, Greg. You could say, hey, whoever wins this title, you have the case to be the best team in the country. And that's, I mean, obviously all four 1 seeds, but these were the four teams that analytically were just near the top all year.
Joe, for reference, since you said it, I did pull up DraftKings to look at odds. Duke is the betting favorite. I know you didn't necessarily say betting favorite, but
Mhm.
plus 110 for Duke, plus 250 for Florida, plus 400 for Houston, and plus 475 for Auburn, which, yes, I did just spend $10 live on air and put my money on Auburn.
There you go. All right, let's go to the West region, Greg. We have Houston coming out of this region. We saw that game earlier today where they beat Tennessee. But let's start off. Houston beats Purdue. Now, it looked like Houston had this one in the bag. They were up by 10 with about 8 minutes left. And you're thinking, with Houston's defense, they'll get the job done. But late in the game, Cam Heide hits a big three to tie the game. And then Houston gets another possession. There is a questionable push off that happens, but then they have a good baseline out of bounds play by Kelvin Sampson drawn up where they have read earlier in the game and also earlier in the season where Braden Smith guards the inbounder, but he turns and finds the open man when other guys get picked. That's something that Purdue's going to want to fix this offseason if they were scouted that easily, but they throw the ball in. JoJo Tugler, who makes a great pass, and Houston gets a wide open layup for the win in this one, 62-60. Then we go to Kentucky and Tennessee, and this is a game we don't want to talk about. But Tennessee was on, Kentucky was not on, and it's hard to beat a team three times, like we said last week, Greg. But Tennessee's defense really came into this one. Kentucky very good efficiently offensively, every single all through the season, then score 65 points. This is a credit to Rick Barnes. Their defensive strategy, how they guarded, was very on point. And so Tennessee gets to the final against Houston, and Greg, this one, I mean, it was over at the first half. Like it was done. It's Tennessee had 15 points. That is the lowest. The 15 points at the end of the first half. It is the lowest total for anyone who has seeded one or two in NCAA tournament history, not just in the Elite Eight game. I saw your buddy Matt Norlighter tweeted that. Um, and Houston just suffocates them. There were points where Tennessee got close to maybe got it to 10 or to 12, but Houston suffocating defense got it done. LJ Cryer had a big game with 17 points after he didn't have a big game earlier in the Sweet 16. So it's good for Houston. They definitely deserve this one. And Greg, I think important to note that they could just beat you in so many different ways. And we mentioned too for Tennessee, if they didn't have Chaz Lanier playing well, we're really get their offense. If they didn't have Chaz Lanier and Jordan Gady playing well, it was going to be disastrous. Well, Chaz Lanier, 4 of 18, 2 of 12 from three, finished with 17 points, but that's not great shooting. Jordan Gady arguably should have played more off the bench and had more of a role. He had 17 points on 6 of 12 shooting. So that was kind of how it ended for Tennessee, just like we said it would. If one of them has a bad game, they are very vulnerable, and Houston's not the team where you want to have one of those guys play a bad game.
Yeah, I don't have much to say about the Tennessee Kentucky other than still feel like Kentucky exceeded expectations. Let's see what over the next couple weeks what Mark Pope does in the portal. Up to the Houston Purdue game, Joe, I don't know if you heard any of some of the post game. I know you put out a little Twitter video, kind of breaking that down, but I did see that in a post game interview. I don't know if it was Uzan or if it was Tugler, but they said that was not the primary option, but they did discuss that, that was something they had watched in film, that oftentimes Braden Smith would break off and try and take away one of the options on baseline out of bounds plays. So want to make sure we give JoJo Tugler a little bit of credit for a good read in the moment. And obviously it looks wide open, but there's 2.8 seconds left on the clock. To catch and pass, you got that's something that you're prepared for that moment. You're thinking ahead and you put yourself in that position. That's not just luck. That's good coaching and good coachability from the player. Talking about today's game, I mean, could have honestly, if you'd have closed your eyes at, the 10-minute mark in the first half, you probably would have seen just as much as you needed to. It was pretty much almost immediately over. There was just times where and there were times where Tennessee got open looks. It was usually on second chance opportunities or times where, they drove in and brought that Houston double inside, but they just weren't going down, and I think that Houston defense, it's not just the doubles. It's kind of the way it rattles you. It throws off your momentum, your rhythm, so that when, I just think in one in particular, it was a wide open look that Ziegler had, and it never had a chance of going in. I believe it was in the first half, and that it just made me think like what it's got to feel like playing against a defense like that, because Joe, you remember when you're playing pickup against some dudes, and there's some dudes that are playing defense and they're playing super hard, and it makes the game feel different. So Houston has a tendency obviously to do that with some of the blitz doubles packages that they bring on screens and down low in the post, and just credit to Kelvin, masterful job from them. They're back in the Final Four. they'll get a better experience, hopefully, because I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but 2021 was the last Final Four they went to, which would have been a bubble. That was the tournament that was all in Indianapolis, correct? So it was the bubble year. So hopefully get a little bit more of the festivities and the fun, and obviously schools hang banners for the Final Four. That's one of the things I love about this sport is it's not just about who wins the title. Obviously that's the thing that means the most, but I mean, we talk about making coaches careers off just making Final Fours, and Sampson's now brought Houston to their second since I'm assuming that I don't think they went any time between what was it 84 with Olajuwon, and I don't think they went any time between then and 2021. So obvious great turnaround for that program, completely done by Kelvin Sampson. Got a feel for Indiana fans. I know I have a couple I work with. I just wonder if they're how upset they are knowing that it's something stupid that doesn't mean anything anymore is why he's not at Indiana, and them thinking all the what ifs, especially with how that program cares about basketball. Can't even imagine where they'd be right now.
I'll never feel for Indiana fans. They made their bed, but it's interesting to note, Greg. I do think that Purdue's going to have to change the way they guard that next season. It is a pretty common way to guard inbounds plays, but you're telling me like I think it was CJ Cox was guarding who I forget who was the one who flared out on the side, and he was a step behind, but like a mildly or uncontested mid-range shot versus an uncontested layup is what we're talking about here. They maybe if Braden Smith stays, which he is not supposed to do, he did what he was supposed to do. That's the difference between going to the Final Four or not. So, also point out Braden Smith did have 15 assists, but again, just against Houston, you can't have your best players have bad games. He was 2 of 7 from the floor and 7 points, and they talked all year, Matt Painter especially, about how they asked him to score more points this year, and he stepped up because they needed him to. Um, I'm not sure he's great as I guess, number two option in this offense behind Trey Kaufman-Renn, and that's where his limitations are going to be. He's going to be a very good point guard. If you have a lot of good players around him, he's going to manage the game, but that is something that to note in the future of like next year if he enters the transfer portal or if he stays, a lot of it might be the same. He will score sometimes, but a lot of times he's going to need other people to open up the floor around him, which is good that Fletcher Lawyer joined with him. He'll be back next year, and Trey Kaufman-Renn will probably be back too. So watch out for that for Purdue. Houston makes the Final Four. You're right, Greg. That is a good turnaround for that program. Kelvin Sampson did a really good job. There was 20 years when they were just bad, bad. I mean, they're bottom of the heap in the AAC. So, yeah, we'll keep it moving though. We have
Joe, before we move on, the one thing we want to mention about Tennessee, you want to take a moment to gloat about their Final Four history. I know you're a humble guy, but as a Kentucky fan, this is your moment. You
No,
want to say anything?
I won't gloat about it. I don't do that like they do. But as a Kai Ziegler, you're going to flick off the Kentucky logo, and then you're going to go talk shit at the end of your game. Guess what? Your season ended crying on the bench. So if you want to talk shit, that's great. But then you end up taking it too. So you took it a lot worse than that, and also a lot of propaganda about this Tennessee guard this whole year. He is not as good as people think. It is crazy that Greg, you pointed out Ryan Nembhard wasn't on the top five list for top point guards. Give me him over Zakai Ziegler any day. He gets a lot of like, oh, he's 5'9", he's a little guy, he plays defense. He's not the greatest defensive point guard either, especially considering other players in the conference. And Meshack was the best defensive player on the team. So sorry about that little rant, but he's a very good point guard. Tennessee should remember him forever. But we're talking about this sport right now. I would take 5 or 6 point guards in the sport over him without hesitation. So, all right. So we have Auburn, Duke, and Houston. Let's go to the last region, Greg. We have Florida coming out of this one. We have Florida beating Maryland in their first game. This was the Kevin Willard last game of the season. They win 87-71. Derek Queen does have 27 points. A lot of Maryland fans think, oh, we just checked out before this game. Maybe Florida's good too. Maybe that's part of it. Then they have Texas Tech and Arkansas. And you think this one's wrapped up, and Arkansas is going to the Elite Eight. And Texas Tech comes with a fierce comeback and gets the job done here. John L. Davis had 30 points for Arkansas. JT Toppin had a really good game for Texas Tech. And Texas Tech played a couple very good, entertaining games this weekend. They win the game in overtime, 85-83. I don't even know if I've said that yet, but Greg, I don't know what the number was, but they were down by I think
16.
16 with like 10
Largest lead,
minutes to go.
16. Yeah.
Yes, and it was I think 10 with like 3 minutes to go, and then they cut it down to like nine, or excuse, it was 10, and then they tied it with like it was 3 minutes to go, and I think it was a 9 point lead, and then they tied it within a minute of that time. So just a crazy comeback here, and it maybe gives some credence to what they've done all season long, which was have JT Toppin surrounded by shooters, and those shooters did step up in this one. Chance McMillan did not play in this game. He did come back for the next game against Florida, and as wild as a game as that one was, Greg, and I'm sure you'll have something to say about that as well. Uh, Florida is down late, and they have to come back, and they're down by a ton. And they, in similar fashion, they come back and they down by like 10 with like 3 minutes left, and they come back and do the same thing. So Walter Clayton has become a hero for Florida fans, and probably even more than just Florida fans. He had a plenty of tough shots at the end. He was having a solid game before that, but he really kind of broke out at the end there. And they were able to get the win 84-79 after, I mean, it was 67-57 with 7.5 minutes left. And they just kept on fighting and kept on going for it, and they got the job done, Greg. So Florida is in the Final Four, all four number one seeds. Just an incredible story for those last two games we talked about in that region.
Yeah, thanks to the West region. They actually kicked it into gear and gave us some drama once I tweeted about how lackluster of a tournament it's been. And I mean, it kind of still has. Like, we definitely got some fun out of this. I'm really hoping for a great Final Four. We haven't had a ton of fireworks and drama. Obviously it's still worth watching. I still love every second of it, but we've had a lot of games finish, 15, 20 point margin. And if it finished at like 10, it was really honestly 20 with, 5 minutes ago. And then you get cases like this where it was a big margin, start with the Texas Tech Arkansas game. Thank you, Red Raiders, making me some good money. Darian Williams with the shot, the 3-pointer to tie the game in regulation, and then the bucket that gave them the win in overtime. So good for him. You kind of wonder, Chance McMillan played in the Florida game, but he still seems like he's not 100%. Still with the lead that they had, you got to finish that game. And obviously they just had the other side of the coin in the Sweet 16, where they were down and then they come back and win the game. But I mean, Florida just went on a tear. There was, a couple of Hawk threes and a couple of, and not just threes from Walter Clayton, but like ridiculous off kilter circus acrobatic shots. The ending of this game was fun, and it didn't even come down to the buzzer, but it had everything I wanted in a game, to come down to the finish. I thoroughly enjoyed this game. It's weird it finishes with a 5-point margin, just considering, like we already said, where Florida was at one point in that game, how much they were down and how late. But it did kind of, they've been the ones that they struggled with UConn. They were almost out of this game. I really liked your title pick. I think I've dialed that back down a little bit. And I think I literally just put money on Auburn. I've shifted my focus back to, I think Auburn. Now, obviously, if we get Auburn Duke again, it's going to be different because it's not going to be in Cameron Indoor. So, as far as the Auburn Florida, yeah, they're deep. Florida is very deep. Chani Broom's health is going to be the first question. I know he goes out, he comes back in the game, but he's been dealing with injuries at this point for several weeks now, between the ankle and the this and the that. You pointed out on the broadcast, Joe, when he came back in the game late, because I thought it was funny. I saw Rothstein tweeted an elbow injury, and then other people were saying a leg injury. But if you looked at the save he made going out of bounds, he did not use one of his arms. He used one arm to grab the ball. So maybe that elbow is Bob. X-rays were negative. They did say that, so we checked back into the game. But maybe he did something a little. I mean, maybe it was just a bad, he got hit in the wrong place and it just kind of was kind of numb or whatever. But just something to think about. I know there's been, the jokes have been going on of a not quite Willis Reed and stuff like that, but I will be curious about that. Have to think if he came back in the game, because if there was any question, he's not going back in that game. I have to imagine it was just painful than anything else. But if for some reason find out this week that hey, that ankle swelled up, even though everybody's dealing with injuries right now, that might change my view a little bit. But I still like Auburn over Florida.
Well, I don't know how we got to our picks already, but okay. Here we go. The one thing I'll say about this region,
Stream of consciousness, Joe.
I was like, we're talking about the West region. All of a sudden, you're talking about Janai Broom and his injury for a minute or two. And okay. The last thing I'll say about the West region, Greg, I kind of disagree with you. I'm still pretty heavy on Florida. And the reason is they played the toughest way to get to the Final Four, I think. Now, Houston did play the statistical. They played the 8, the 4, and the 2 after getting the 16. But UConn was a very tough 8 seed. And Gonzaga was for Houston, too. Maryland was a very tough game. Texas Tech, I like them a lot better than the 2 seeds. And again, Tennessee didn't score the ball as well. So while I do think that Houston had a tough one, I'll say Duke. I mean, Arizona. I mean, they did get the good Arizona, so that's cool. But Auburn, I mean, we had Michigan. I don't think Michigan was really highly thought of. Everyone picked them to lose in the first round. And then we had Michigan State, who can't really score either. So I really do think Florida had the toughest test to get here. It was a tough region, and they battled through. So I'm not folding on them. But Greg, let's get to both of your Final Four picks, and then we'll get to the championship pick too. But what do you got? Surprise us.
All right. Well, I honestly just went stream of consciousness there with where my mind was going, but because I started going into what I think of Florida versus Auburn, because we were talking about obviously the West region, and then I realized I was skipping a track on the disc, but I figured whatever, I'm already halfway through my thought. I'm not just going to stop. But for the reasons I already said, I'm going to stick with what's in my bracket. It's the one thing that I still have going on. I did not get either of the teams on the right side of the bracket into the Final Four. I will take Auburn over Florida. I cannot recall which of these two games is. I think this is going to be the first one, Joe. This Auburn Florida game, I think, is the first tip, correct?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
So I will take Auburn over Florida in the first one. And now that I have already given plenty of analysis, let's hear what you've had to say since I jumped ahead.
Oh, you're all good. I am going with Florida. I'm sticking with my national championship pick. Like I said, they're battle tested in this tournament. They've shown they can win late games. They know they have a clutch player, Walter Clayton. If it does get close in this game, they won at Auburn this year already. I know we talked about Kentucky and Tennessee. Maybe playing teams multiple times isn't as easy, but I think they can get the job done again. There's so many different ways they can beat you, and that is so difficult. Where Auburn does have a lot of good players and different people stepping up, but a lot of it starts with Janai Broom, whereas Florida, I mean, every single game. We saw Thomas Hall last game come up like big for them. He's not like one of their better players. He's a rotational guy. They find a way. So I'm taking Florida over Auburn, and I do think having a go-to guard on the perimeter that I've talked about all season is one of the reasons that Auburn doesn't have that. They do have Todd Pettiford, who's becoming that more and more as the season goes on. But there's some games where it'll be one guy, some games where it'll be another for them, and Walter Clayton's going to be there for Florida. And then also, as I mentioned all year, the teams that can beat Auburn are the ones that can throw tons of bodies on the interior at them. Florida has that with all the bigs they have, especially with Han Logden coming back. I'm not even sure he was even playing at the point where they played Auburn last time. I don't think he was. So just add another body to throw at Janai Broom. He's already banged up. So we'll see how that comes out. But I'll take Florida to win that one. And Greg, that sets up Duke and Houston, and that is going to be a ridiculously fun game. There's a lot of metrics that'll tell you those are the two best teams in the country.
Yeah, with that game, I am really interested to see how Houston attacks offensively. Tugler is size, but the rest of their bigs they're not huge. We know that Duke does have some size inside between Malawach and obviously Cooper Flag plays all over the floor and has great size for the position he plays. I'm going to be really interested to see how they try to score. We know that Duke defense is it's elite. Not to say that the Houston defense isn't, but I think that side of the game is going to be the most interesting thing for me because there are times where I feel like Houston offense stalls a little bit. Um, if I remember correctly, I don't think either of their best guys had tremendously efficient shooting days today. I'm trying to pull it up right now. I thought Cryer had a 6 of 17 from Cryer, 6 of 14 from Sharp. Although Sharp, when the game was already done with Tennessee, he's throwing up deep threes and they're going in. So I guess he hit them when they needed to. But that kind of performance, I just don't think gets it done against Duke. We know Tennessee's defense is good, but their offense just wasn't good enough to handle the Houston defense. You're not going to be able to get away with that when you play Duke. So I will really be interested in how they set up LJ Cryer to get looks from deep, how they try to, they're going to have to go inside too. You're not going to be able to just, which they never tended to do. They're not like Alabama where they take tons of threes. They do take them, but they don't take them in mass. So I think that side of the floor is going to be the most interesting to me because I think we really kind of already know what the Houston defense is, and we really already kind of know what we get from the Duke offense. Seeing how Houston tries to attack and how Duke tries to guard is going to be, for me, the more interesting side of the ball. Excited to get to watch this game. Excited to get to pick this game because I don't have anything on it in my bracket, and I can actually just watch the game. And usually I'm at this point by the Sweet 16. But it was a chalky year and I picked a lot of chalk. So now I got to give you a pick. And I got to really think about it.
You've been stalling this whole time.
Yeah. I was trying to come up with more analysis because
I don't even know if you said
I'm
anything
gonna
analytical at the last 2 minutes of that. You're just stalling the whole time.
I will take Duke.
Bold. All right, I'm taking Duke too. This is
And that
a
hurts your soul.
I mean, I pick it like I see it, just like I did my bracket. I had Florida Duke championship. I'm going to stick with that pick. Duke, I mentioned earlier this year, Cooper Flag can go on an Anthony Davis like run, and they are doing just that. A freshman led team. He is incredible. His passing is underrated. He is setting up his teammates, and I think it's covered up for a lot of Duke's guard play. I'm not saying Duke has bad guard play, but then the same thing I'll say about Auburn is like they don't have a go-to guy necessarily. That has been something that I think has been good that Cooper Flag's been able to do so well with that. Now, for Houston, your goal here, your way you win is yes, like your guard play should be better than Duke's. Like you have experienced players, you have really good ones. So that's how you're gonna have to do it. LJ Cryer has to have a big game. Make Duke's make Duke's guards guard you. I can't say that. And then make them struggle from the floor. Make the paint collapse on Cooper Flag, and I think that you can maybe win the game. That tough-minded defense definitely does have a chance to win this one. The Auburn Florida game has a 2.5 point spread. This one is a 4.5 point spread in favor of Duke. But so I do think Duke wins, but I do think Houston could keep it even closer than that spread if that defense shows up like it always does. All right, Greg. So you have Auburn Duke in the championship. Who you going with?
I'll pick Auburn to win now that the game's on a neutral floor instead of Cameron Indoor. Although this Duke team definitely is in a much better spot, and they have, I don't want to say improved more than as much as I want to say developed. They've grown. Not that they were ever, obviously they've been one of the best teams in the country the whole year, but they really have grown. I think you should give some credit to Jon Scheyer on that. The team has, it's weird because I don't want to say they've come a long way because they've always been good, but they're definitely not the team that played in November, and that team already beat Auburn. So they're definitely capable of winning the national championship. They have kind of put to bed, like Joe already said today, those questions of, well, that was just, the easy ACC schedule, even though they did play some good teams out of conference. I still have just like something from this Auburn team. It's like when I feel like when they're on offense, I can either count on. I know that, like Joe has already said, they don't have a necessarily like a go-to that dude who's getting the ball like Florida does. Walter Clayton's getting it when you're down 10 or whatever, but it's just been different dudes at different times. Miles Kelly can hit some shots for you. Tahad Pettiford has been hitting shots. Obviously, we know Janai Broom controls the paint. Dylan Cardwell is willing to do absolutely anything and everything that he can possibly do to help this team win, except shoot free throws well. That's probably the only thing I would say he could work on. But I mean, rebounding, defense, finishing at the. I mean, there is a lot on this team that I like. And I think they have more depth than Duke, although I think some of those questions have gone to bed as well. They're getting more contributions off their bench than they were earlier in their year. I'm still going to pick Auburn to win the national title.
Okay. I'm going with my pick of Florida. I'm sticking with it. Like I said, gun to my head. I don't know. It's very close between Florida and Duke, but I'll take Florida still. I think the guard play is going to be the reason why. Tyrese Proctor had 17 points last game. He might need to have a game like that, and I just don't know if that's going to happen. Florida does have those big bodies. They could throw Cooper Flag, and I think maybe frustrate him a little bit. And I really like Florida. Their ability to hit tough shots, play in close games, play well. I think we haven't really seen Duke in a very, very tight game. And I think that's going to be maybe coming back to bite him in this one. So I'll take Florida to win it all. Duke's had a good season. There have been some miscues. Since Isaiah Evans has been in the lineup, they've only lost like one or two games. So, John Shire should have seen that sooner, but that's all right. But we have, yeah, I have Florida winning it all. You have Auburn, so we both have from the left side of the bracket. But I would think, and as gambling odds indicate, that most everyone has Duke outside of us, Greg. So that is good that we're on by ourselves. Before I get to your final thoughts here, Greg, one final note about this. We have like a lot of teams do their one seeds, but they fought through adversity in different ways. Remember, Auburn this whole year started with the turning the plane around thing. Duke had the Cooper Flag injury. We were like, I don't know, is he hurt for a long term? Is he not? Houston had their injury with Juwan Roberts as well. We didn't know how that was going to be. He's back now. Florida had all the off the court stuff with the coaching staff that some of it's still ongoing, I believe. So it is like a lot of teams that have put a lot of distractions away, have overcome injuries, and it is interesting to see that yes, they're one seeds and they are favorites, and we're gonna get some really good games out of this, but they've overcome adversity by themselves. Greg, any final thoughts here?
Yeah, I did. I did have a tweet up, just a little tidbit. This is a Rothstein tweet. So when Bruce Pearl got the Auburn job in 2014, he hired a young kid from Columbia to be his first director of basketball operations. That was Todd Golden. I did forget to mention that when I was doing my picks for the Auburn Florida game. I'm sure there's any way you slice it, there's stories, but the best part of this is we've got inarguably in terms of efficiency, in terms of talent, we've got the best four teams here, and that doesn't always happen. So we should be in for some really good basketball. And with the lack of some things that we've got in this tournament, I would love to see 3 great games to finish out the year. I don't really care if my bracket is right or wrong at this point. I would like to see 3 great basketball games, and I am expecting that. Yeah, maybe it's not going to be a buzzer beater. I know, Joe, there's been times this year where we've been watching. I can't think of what game it was, but there's probably been 2 or 3 times this year where we've said, "Hey, man, this game we're watching is elite basketball." And that's what I'm expecting to get in the Duke Houston game. It might be a little grittier, because of the defense that both of those teams play. In the Auburn Florida game, it might be more physical. It may not be, Alabama scoring 105. But I think it's going to be good basketball for 3 more games.
Let's hope so. I would have thought we had more moments in March already for this March, but hopefully they are coming at the end here. It's my turn to remind everyone to like and subscribe to us wherever you get your podcast, whether that be Apple or Spotify or wherever. Also, like and subscribe to the Game House YouTube channel. We're actually doing a little bit better over there now, so we appreciate any support we can get over there. We will answer any comments you have over there if we see them on the next show and just kind of talk about it as well. For now, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time.